Okay, Trastorned is a Santiago, Chile-based thrash metal band. Uh, Most would consider it a blackened thrash metal band, but it's an old school thrash metal band from my point of view. And Into the Void is their debut album. Um, Now, if you want to relate this band's history to uh, early German thrash, that would make sense. It's not really the result here on now, well over 10 years beyond their inception, where their sound is now closer to something somewhere in between like Forbidden, Coroner, and Possessed, and with a vocal style that leans what I would consider like Bay Area thrash metal in the late 80s, and you might find similar affect from another Chilean band, Mental Devastation, but they lean more towards maybe even closer to atheist. This is in the thrash metal realm. It is still extreme thrash metal, but not quite reaching for death metal or black metal really either. Unless we're talking about the 80s, there's a lot of caveats here. Basically, it's riff metal that is very much focused on late 80s thrash metal for style and influence. It's an interesting result coming from a band who, for most of their career up to that point, had put out. They'd sort of been figuring out what they wanted to be early on. It took them a while. It took a couple of lineups. And what you see when you return to those demos is an approximation of evil speed metal early on. And then their own style was basically developed between 2018 and 2014. Now, I'm sure they had a lot of roadblocks in between then and now, but really, when we go back and listen to the Witching demo from 2014, they knew who they were at that point. It was just a matter of getting it right. And we actually find a couple of those songs carried through onto the album. So it's a fast, short, and aggressive thrash metal record. It really will appeal to people who enjoy the sort of, let's say, 83 to about 89 side of thrash. And especially if you're very familiar with the way that bands like Exodus and uh, less so Demolition Hammer, but definitely how the Bay Area seeded the rest of what thrash metal would become over time. So that's all well and good. I think it's a really important note for who will actually buy this album and listen to it. But if you also like death thrash metal, if you like Possessed, if even the second Possessed album, uh, there is a lot to like in Into the Void because the guitar techniques aren't so arcane or archaic that they haven't updated at least to a sort of early uh, black or death thrash side of things. So there's a lot of technique here. There's some an interesting mix here, which definitely attempts to sound old school and I think pulls it off for the most part. But because I'm such a fan of Possessed and Forbidden, I think those are the major notes that are going to get a lot of people interested in this band. And it's sort of the core appeal that got me to pick it up and just keep listening to it. Um, Now, this is my favorite kind of thing, and I really enjoy a lot of thrash metal in general, not just the stuff out of Chile, but this was one of those immediately, like, I knew what it was, I enjoyed what it was, and it's a really fine result for a band that had been at it for so long. And you can tell that um, it would do. It's sort of like Critical Defiance. They definitely took a while to get there, and when they did, it was an exceptional record. So very high rating for me, a very high recommendation, uh, and that's more because it is so tuned to what I like about thrash metal and kind of that sweet spot that it hits in terms of both old school and having something new to add to that at all. I'm always impressed when a band fits in uh, both in revision of the past, but also contributing something of their own personality. And I think this band is more than on their way to something substantial here in terms of what a thrash metal listener would want. And for people who have dug into thrash more than the surface level stuff. So yeah, again, a high recommendation for me. and well worth checking out. And see if that's your kind of thing.